So on this video, we're going to try to show a Ducati track bike fairing that had been damaged in a crash, how we prepare it, repair the carbon fiber internal parts, and do the cosmetic paintwork on the outside of the fairing to make it what I think is better than new. And it's part of what we try to do on this channel. We try to share information about motorcycling, about paintwork, carbon fiber, and in general, restoring older things to make them better than new. And if you're new to this channel, I hope you enjoy this video. It's really not complicated to do this kind of work, but it is definitely a labor of love. And let's get down to the shop and repair this part right now. So this is the Ducati fairing that we're going to work on today. This is for Glenn. This is one of his track bikes. One of his bikes I think we painted 3 times, one of the original track bikes. I don't know which one, I don't remember which one this is, but we did a nice repair. There's some good information on here if you've dumped your track bike or whatever and need to do a little repair. It's really not a big deal to do this. It's a lot of labor, but I don't think any of it is rocket science, so I hope you get some good information off this video. And we're going to do the mechanical part of this repair using Brodak CA. It's available from Brodak.com, both thin and thick CA and kick. Now CA is capillary, so when you insert, put some any near a crack, bend the crack back and forth a little bit, let it seep in. It goes in, it's capillary, it gets in, and just wipe it with a paper towel or don't get it on your hands, of course. Now the next step where we're going to put the carbon fiber, I want to roughen it up. First of all, it's got to be super clean with degreaser or simple green. And then I want to roughen it up. The rougher I can make this, the better chance I have that the CA and the carbon are going to bond. And usually they bond really well to almost any material, but it's got to be clean. It's got to be rough. It can't be smooth, and it can't have any grease or oil or fingerprints on it to get a really good bond. Now that's right there, that's about how it should be prepped. Now what we're using here is just a scrap from another job of, this is I think 6-ounce weave, and I can cut what I think is going to be an appropriate size patch here. And I want to make sure I have as few loose ends as possible just to make cleaning it up easier. I'll put on some thin CA, and this is really not a high-tech thing, but you don't want to get it on your fingers, you don't want to get it on the work table, so you want to plan this out a little bit. Always handy if you have a helper or some way to hold that fairing, you can have both hands free. That's always a great idea if you're doing this kind of repair. But the first thing you want to do on any repair, and this is the critical tip to get from the video, you want to do the mechanical part first. In other words, you want the part not to crack again. You want to reinforce it in the part that's broken or cracked or damaged, and all of the mechanical repair done first before you even look at the other side where the paint is and try to do the cosmetic part, and that's a great tip. Now once that CA is dry, that carbon fiber is embedded into the carbon fiber or e-glass that the part is made out of, you can put an extra layer or 2 of carbon and or some more CA, or if you want to make it pretty, put a little bit of 5-minute epoxy on top so you could sand it smooth. But in this case, you don't see this part, so I wanted this to be basically as strong as I could make it. Now using sandpaper and a sanding block, I can, most important thing, radius that edge off so there's no sharp edges and no sharp needles of carbon that are going to wind up under your fingernail while you're doing the finishing up. Now there's a lot of cosmetic damage from the cracks, but every one of them has to get done exactly the same. They need to be reinforced before we ever go out and try to do the cosmetic work on the front of the part. Now once all the reinforcing is done, I can look in at the paint side of this, and I know where it's been reinforced. We've got a lot of places on this needed that. What I want to do, you can see I checked it by hammering on it with my fist. Now I want to see any of the places where the crack is come through all the way to the front and seal them with thin CA. This thin CA is capillary. You can push it down with a Q-tip, a paper towel, but you don't want to glue. Again, don't glue your finger. But this is capillary now. It's going to seal that crack. Some is going to go down, even in these cosmetic areas up in the front where they're damaged. That if you get used to the idea that the CA goes down into the crack and seals it, both at the same time. Another thing, CA is easy to sand. It sands about the same as fiberglass, so it's easy to blend it in. In this case, I don't want to, if I were to skip this step, those little cracks would come through after I painted it. But now that I've gone through, that has basically sealed the crack, and that's going to protect 99.9% of the time when I do the final block sanding and grinding and get it ready for paint. I won't be able to find these once I prime them and once I do some of the final sanding. But this is a critical step. This is a step you don't want to leave out before you do any sanding. And of course, the part has to be clean. You want to get that CA down into all the cracks and paint edges. Now, I like to backmask using tin foil. That was shared to everybody in the modeling community by the late Walt Prey. He was a custom car guru out in California. Shared that information. It's worked well for me. I want to backmask all the parts of this that don't need to be repainted. And in this case, it's just the red. And because we had repainted Glenn's track bikes in the past 2 or 3 times, we had plenty of the matching red. But I'm going to have to sand off those decals, and I'm going to have to get this part perfectly smooth, and it's going to take a little time to do that. And it's a really handy tool to have, this little detail power sander. Again, this is a Harbor Freight tool, under $20. It helps in a job like this. Now, sometimes these stickers are under the clear. I don't remember if this was the case, but I can seal them either way. I can sand them off, and all these big cracks in the material, I'm just going to fill them with thick CA, thin CA, or just sand it down smooth. Try to peel up as much of that sticker as I can by hand. But in the end, it's got to be all sanded smooth. And the power sander is a big help. But even if you don't have one, you can take a nice sanding block and some maybe 100 grit paper, 120, and just block sand that down. It's got to be flat, and it's got to be rough before we go on. And using a sanding block, this is the part where it's just going to take a lot of time. It's patience. Start with some rougher paper, end up with some 400 maybe. Get that all the edges radiused and get that so smooth you can't even feel it when you run your hand over it before you put any paint at all on it. Now, using that sanding block and getting finer and finer grit paper, I've gone down through to most of the paint, and I want to be able to feel this be perfectly smooth. That's the whole trick. With your bare hand, you want to feel it, that it's perfectly smooth before you go on, because once you put paint on it, you're really kind of married to it. So it pays to do a sanding right now and get it right. And anytime you have paint edges to deal with, or a part that's sanded and a part that isn't sanded, where it's the old paint and then there's no paint, I want to seal it with primer sealer. Any brand, Rust-Oleum, Duplicolor, but primer sealer, not just automotive primer, or not just the kind that you want to sand when you have a lot of body work to bury. That this primer sealer, the Duplicolor, is especially good, but the Rust-Oleum seems to work just as well too. Now, even though this is a track bike and it's not going to ever go into any bike shows, it really only took me a little bit of extra time to take this first coat of primer, sand it down, and look for all the places that we repaired. This part had a lot of parts, a lot of repairs on it too. So I thought it would be worth the extra step to dry sand this down, probably, and maybe even 2 or 3 times, but to get the spots where we did the repair and the spots where we did the body work as smooth as possible, that I can't even feel it with my hand. And because this was a bright sunny day in the middle of the summer, what happens here is the paint dries up very quickly, and you can do this step maybe 15 minutes to half an hour later. And if you skip this step, somewhere in the final product, you may see those paint edges after you put the clear on or more of the paint. And one of the things I try to avoid when I put on 2 or 3 coats of primer, put the coats on thin. I don't like to put on one big wet coat that's possibly going to run or going to be some kind of another problem. It's always better to put on a lot of light coats, sand a little bit between coats. At the end of the job, you spent a little more time, but you'll always be glad you spent that extra little time. Now again, because we were painting a lot of Ducatis, we had plenty of red paint that matched. But sometimes you got to be careful with red and with yellow. They are very difficult colors. If you get them wrong, you really notice it when you put the 2 parts together. But this worked out to be, for all purposes, this was a perfect match without any extra effort. And most colors, you can't really tell if it's a perfect paint match until you have the clear on and it's buffed out. But this was a good day for painting. This dried up beautifully, and we could get the clear on the same day. That really made this job go smoothly. Now this is the clear we used, and you can take the numbers off that. And of course, any 2-part paint, 4-to-1 clear, anything that you have to add a hardener to or a catalyst, it's imperative that you wear a mask. In this case, I used a mask that comes from Harbor Freight. It's kept me alive for many, many years, and it seemed to work pretty well. Now, getting the clear on, again, the whole trick of everything. The trick of painting is put on a lot of thin coats, not one big glocky coat and you get a run or an edge or whatever. Thin coats, a lot of thin coats, low pressure. You'll always be way ahead of the game of somebody who tries to get it all on with a big gun in one coat. Now, when that job was done, a day later, Glenn could put his stickers back on the bike, put the bike back together, put it back on a trailer, and get ready for another fun track day. And this was a labor of love, but was for a good friend for sure. And by sharing this information on the video, maybe it'll be in some way help you to do repair work on your bike should you ever need to do it. And what's even better is if you never have to do it, but just enjoy the video either way. So if you're new to our channel, we try to share our passion for motorcycling, repairing, painting, shop projects, custom wheels, 2-strokes, polishing engine parts, basically all of the passions you would have if you want to have a unique, custom, one-of-a-kind motorcycle, or you just want to keep a stock one as close to being perfect as you can. Or if you like new bikes, if you like old bikes, you like 2-strokes, or you love to do paint work, or you just like to watch videos. Now let's get out and do some riding and maybe a few wheelies. And thanks so much for watching.